Many academic scientists at a number of universities have begun studying Protandim because it represents a new tool. It represents a way of reducing oxidative stress that wasn't available before. There simply was not a good way of doing what Protandim does. Protandim interacts with the DNA in your cells and causes the cells to make more of a set of genes called survival genes. The ingredients in Protandim were actually selected because they are largely metabolized by the liver, which does not interfere with most prescription drugs, which are generally metabolized by the kidneys. So the general answer to that is yes, it is safe. The immediate benefits of Protandim are within several days, the biochemical markers of oxidative stress begin to decrease. And while these are immediate improvements, you may not sense that these things are happening, just as you can't sense what your cholesterol level is if it's high or low. But nonetheless, these benefits start happening within days of taking Protandim. The advantages to taking Protandim in the long term are that it protects your body from the relentless progression of free radical damage as we age. The anti-aging aspect of Protandim is one that accumulates over time, so the longer you take it, the more protection you will sustain. Missing a dose of Protandim is not a big problem. It takes about 2 weeks for the effects to go away. So if you miss it for 2 weeks, you're pretty much back to where you started from.
We've got to have the hard science behind products that we recommend. And unfortunately, there are a lot of products out on the market today that do not have the science that they need. Protandim has the science that you can depend on.
The question that was raised in the science call was, what distinguishes Protandim from other products? And you've already heard this today from a couple of speakers, and it's worth reiterating and re-emphasizing. One of the major distinguishing features of Protandim is the peer-reviewed published science. And I have grown up literally for the past 40 years of my life dealing with the peer review process. And so to me it's second nature. I don't even think about what those two words mean. But about a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, I got an email from Ben Seaman, and he said, someone asked me, what does peer reviewed really mean? And he wanted me to just explain it to him. And I sent him an email that had this text, and I don't expect you to read all that, too many words. That's more for me. But I explained in detail what those two words, peer-reviewed, really means. When scientists do a study, they write a manuscript describing it, and that manuscript is submitted to a journal for possible publication. And I say possible because you're by no means assured that your manuscript is ever going to be published in a reputable peer-reviewed journal. The journal editor selects 2 or 3 academic scientists who are well qualified to judge the quality of the work and the soundness of the conclusions that are drawn. Usually they are leaders or at least well-known contributors to the field of the science that's being submitted. They act as anonymous reviewers of the work. They're free to question anything and everything about that work. They're free to ask you to do additional experimentation. That frequently happens. They're free to question your conclusions. They're free to question your statistical analysis. This is scrutiny of the highest degree. The author must then respond to that critique from each of these reviewers until all their concerns are met. Sometimes that process takes 4, 5, 6 months, occasionally even longer It can go back and forth a couple of times between the authors and the reviewers. The reviewers are anonymous to each other as well as to the authors, but they do get to see each other's comments. And often what one reviewer says, maybe in the first round, will be picked up by a second reviewer in the second round. And this thing goes back and forth until all the questions are settled and everyone involved agrees this is a sound, well-done study. All right, it takes a while just to describe that process, and trust me, it takes a long time to get through that process. In some journals, only 5 or 10% of the papers that are submitted to that journal are ultimately accepted and published. That's how rigorous the process is. And that's why peer-reviewed articles in reputable journals are much more reliable than something you Google from the internet, something you find on a blog that could be put up by absolutely any person on the planet with no review at all. That's why peer-reviewed articles are more reliable, more informative, and more dependable than what a company may publish itself on its own website. There's no peer review there. A company can say virtually anything unless it flagrantly violates a law, and then it might be taken off. Right? So peer-reviewed published papers really mean a lot.
Much has happened since the development and human testing of Protandim began more than 7 years ago. Back in 2005, ABC Primetime ran a story about Protandim and the human trial then in progress that validated Protandim's significance and effectiveness in reducing oxidative stress by increasing the body's production of two very important antioxidant enzymes called superoxide dismutase, or SOD, and catalase. We were very fortunate to have been noticed by the national media at that early stage in our development, but an enormous increase in the scientific understanding of Protandim has occurred since then. There have been 8 peer-reviewed studies published in mainstream medical journals, 6 of which were funded completely independently of LifeVantage by agencies such as the American Heart Association and the National Institutes of Health. While initially we thought that Protandim might have a positive impact on only 2 antioxidant enzymes, we now know that Protandim is a powerful activator of a biochemical messenger protein called NRF2, NRF2, significantly modulating the expression of more than 1,000 so-called survival genes that enable our cells to cope not only with oxidative stress, but with other types of stress as well. In order to bring you up to date on what is arguably the most important supplement of our time, I'd like to share a few highlights by reviewing some of the major advances that have taken place in the science, including the peer-reviewed studies from a number of well-known universities.
Let me point out to you, too, how dramatically things have changed. Protandim was developed primarily to affect 3 gene products, superoxide dismutase, or SOD, catalase, and glutathione peroxidase. And the literature, as of 5 years ago, led us to believe that this could happen, this would happen with Protandim. And indeed, it did affect those 3 genes. What we've learned in the last 5 years is that it affects not only those 63 genes, but these 400 genes, all right? So 3 of those are SOD, catalase, and glutathione, or glutathione peroxidase. Have we realized that Protandim does a lot more than that? You bet. We went from 3 genes to 400 or 500 genes that we're now talking about. There's a human exercise trial funded by the U.S. Navy underway, and the armed forces, of course, are very interested in performance of soldiers under battle conditions and recovery times, and how much damage is done if you have to just exert yourself over the top for, let's say, 15 minutes of intense exercise. So they're interested not only in the recovery of the damage, but this one is looking at mitochondriogenesis. So there are things you can do that help your cells build more mitochondria, which means they can perform aerobically for longer periods of time. And so that's an interesting study. We now know Protandim does more than just deal with oxidative stress to remedy that situation. It involves not just superoxide dismutase and catalase, the first two enzymes we focused on, but as I told you at Elite Academy last October, we now know that Protandim modulates more than 600 genes. In fact, at higher doses, not used in humans, as many as 4,000 genes can be affected out of a total of 25,000 genes that we have. This is not a minor little tweak. This is a major readjustment of everything that makes you who you are and what you are. Two of the founders of a company called Lifeline Therapeutics that is now known as LifeVantage came to my office, and their idea was, can we put together a laundry list of antioxidant kinds of compounds that could upregulate this entire family of enzymes? And the answer was yes, or at least maybe. What I was presented with was a list of 41 potential ingredients for a product they wanted to call Protandim. And I went through the list and penciled out rapidly about 36 of those ingredients because they were either not of interest or not likely to be effective. What I was left with was 5 botanicals. And the reason these were chosen is they had all had published science behind them showing that they might be able to induce at least SOD and catalase. And we put them together, we tested it in mice, and indeed it did work. The synergy of Protandim caught us all by surprise. It was far more than we hoped for. You might say, why'd you put 5 ingredients in Protandim? Why not just pick the best one? Our bodies don't let those ingredients in. Our guts keep out most of those ingredients. So you can get low concentrations of each of the 5, but not high concentrations. No matter how much you take, you're limited to a low circulating amount. What this slide shows is if you look at the individual contributions of those 5 ingredients, control is nothing. Ashwagandha is the first ingredient, essentially nothing by itself. Bacopa, nothing. Green tea, that's actually negative a little bit by itself. Silymarin, okay, something there. And curcumin, also negative. You put those all together, and you get the red bar on the right. That's what synergy is. A lot of people may look at the label. They may say, well, I've heard of several of these things, and I've been taking curcumin for the last 3 years. Why do I need to take Protandim, which may be more expensive than my bottle of curcumin? This is the reason. You can't do it with curcumin alone. You can't do it with any 2 of those. All 5 of those contribute to this powerful synergy in this particular endpoint, 18 times more than we expected to see by the sum of these individual low concentrations of the ingredients. Better than the sum of the parts. So that second paper showed that the 5 ingredients produce this huge synergy, that each ingredient acts at a low and pharmacologically attainable dose. Sometimes there are papers published showing that in a petri dish, curcumin can do this great thing. Well, your body is not a petri dish. For your body to use curcumin, you have to take the curcumin capsule, and it would have to be absorbed and transported through your body. That's what's limited. It doesn't happen. A little bit of curcumin gets in, not much. Protandim works because the 5 ingredients, it's okay if they're at low concentrations. In fact, it's better that they're at low concentrations because some of them have toxic effects at high concentrations. 5 things at a low concentration working together, amplifying the NRF2 activation is what does the trick. And specific ratios are important. So there's synergy, there's a low dose effectiveness, and there's a specific ratio of these 5 ingredients. This paper also showed that glutathione is dramatically increased, nearly 4-fold, by treating cells with Protandim. And it's not because Protandim contains the precursors you need to make glutathione. It doesn't. How's it working? It's causing the enzymes that make glutathione to be produced. We published this in 2006. Many of you have seen this. This is a measure of oxidative stress in our human clinical trial where we tested these 5 ingredients in humans to see if indeed it could lower oxidative stress. Many of the participants in this trial were taking conventional direct antioxidants, vitamin E, vitamin C, the blue dots. And as you can see, those direct antioxidants were not decreasing oxidative stress with age. In fact, if you draw a line just through those dots, you see that in fact oxidative stress was higher in the people taking direct antioxidants, vitamin E, vitamin C. What happened to these same people when they took the 5 ingredients in Protandim? They took the commercial product, Protandim, for 30 days. And these are the results from those same people. So the 80-year-old on the extreme right, you can see had a high level of about 3 before Protandim, reduced to 1 after Protandim. We now know Protandim does more than just deal with oxidative stress to remedy that situation. It involves not just superoxide dismutase and catalase, the first 2 enzymes we focused on. We now know that Protandim modulates more than 600 genes. In fact, at higher doses, not used in humans, as many as 4,000 genes can be affected out of a total of 25,000 genes that we have. This is not a minor little tweak. This is a major readjustment of everything that makes you who you are and what you are. And that uniqueness to the Protandim composition has resulted in the issuance of U.S. patent. The composition is protected. It can't be knocked off. And it does some really remarkable things. In this 40-year period, more than 60,000 scientific papers have been published. Again, to give you an idea of the magnitudes, probably more than 500,000 pages of published studies showing the various roles of superoxide in more than 100 human diseases, some say 200. And you can see that Protandim entered this picture in the year 2005, 2004, which is really the end of this. That's why I referred to it in the beginning as the icing on the cake. This is where the field is. This is the culmination of molecular biology that tells us how this thing works. And these are universities listed here in the top, where I have colleagues who have said, send me some Protandim. What a remarkable tool for me to use in studying oxidative stress and continuing this 40 years of progress. And the list of diseases at the bottom being studied as diseases of oxidative stress is an amazing spectrum. The term is nutrigenomics. It's how dietary components, things we ingest, interact with the genome, that is the DNA that encodes all 25,000 of your genes, to regulate gene expression. Those genes are the blueprints for everything that you are. What is Protandim? And the definition actually has changed a bit in the last 5 years. In the beginning, what we thought Protandim would be was an antioxidant supplement. Not a conventional one, but a different way of doing it. And that's no longer an adequate description. Protandim is a NRF2 activator in the nutrigenomics arena. NRF2 is one of the key proteins in your body, in every cell in your body, that has the function of regulating your genome. There's about 500 genes, some of which are turned up, some of which are turned down. And NRF2 helps your body balance the expression, the regulation of all those 25,000 blueprints.